Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're unpacking a really interesting stack of sources you've sent over, looking at a bit of a stumble from Manchester City.
Yeah, a team we usually associate with just relentless success. This Sky Sports piece really gets into the weeds of their last season, doesn't it? And, the big questions they're facing this summer.
Right. So our mission, as always, is to cut through the noise a bit, understand why this past season felt like, well, the source calls it a relative failure.
And maybe dig into that central debate the article flags up around Pep Guardiola's whole approach to the squad rebuild. Is it just a small refresh they need, or or is something bigger required? Let's see what the source suggests.
Let's do it. So, setting the scene. The article doesn't exactly pull its punches, does it? Starts off saying City's domestic dominance ended in a quite disastrous fashion. What exactly does it point to there?
Well, the hard facts, really. Finishing third in the Premier League. And, a full 13 points behind Liverpool in the end.
13 points. Wow.
Yeah. And crucially, no trophies, no titles at all. The article is pretty blunt, saying scrapping for Champions League football was as good as it got.
Which, for City, is definitely what you'd call a relative failure. But the analysis in the source, it isn't just blaming one single thing, is it? It seems more complex.
No, absolutely not. It makes that clear. It says Manchester City's problems were, well, numerous. Explicitly states no one reason can explain or excuse the whole campaign.
Okay.
It points to a whole range of stuff. Rodri's injury is mentioned as a big one, obviously.
Yeah.
A sense that maybe Kevin De Bruyne wasn't quite as influential. Questions around Phil Foden's form at times. Even Erling Haaland adapting, believe it or not.
Right. Even Highland.
And interestingly, it mentions criticism for Pep Guardiola himself. So yeah, lots of things coming together, it seems.
Okay, so a pretty bleak picture painted of the season's issues. But amidst all that, the article does find a sort of positive takeaway, or maybe an upside to the downside.
Yeah, it's a bit ironic, really. The one positive, it says, is that because things went wrong, the scale of the rebuild has been extensively revealed. Like the problems are now out in the open.
Ah, right. You can't ignore them.
Exactly. And it mentions the chairman, Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, saying, the club's identified signings, vowing they'll bounce back. Standard chairman stuff, perhaps.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I thought. This contrast the source brings up between the chairman's maybe more bullish view and what it reports about Pep's own plan.
Yes, this is the core debate, isn't it? The article says Pep Guardiola might profess to only want a small group of new players, that he's actually rejected a complete overhaul.
Rejected it.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want the huge budget, the massive clear out.
Apparently not. The source says he does not want unlimited transfer budget and squad overhaul. He prefers, working with a tighter group.
Which is a classic Pep in a way. But
Yeah.
does the article question that? Like, is that the right approach given how last season went?
It definitely raises the question, implicitly anyway. It asks, is Pep right? Is having that compact squad really only effective if it is filled with genuine competitors who can play 40, 50 games a season?
Ah, suggesting maybe some players didn't hit that mark this time.
That's the strong implication, yeah. The analysis suggests the source thinks some players just didn't consistently meet that standard required for Pep's system when things get tough.
Which leads us neatly into the specific player performance dip the article talks about. It's quite direct here.
Oh, very direct. It claims too many Man City players fell below the standard. It goes as far as saying they behaved more like squad players than season champions.
Oof. That's strong language for a team that won the title the year before.
It is, and it mentions De Bruyne, Foden, and Haaland again in this bit.
But with a bit more nuance.
Yeah, exactly. While sort of grouping them in the general underperformance, it does clarify, Haaland's 24 goal contributions were hardly mediocre, and points out all three had injury spells, so maybe they were far from the worst offenders when it came to consistency across the whole season.
So who does the source say was particularly exposed then?
Well, it names names. Jack Grealish comes up prominently. Bernardo Silva, too.
Yeah.
And even younger players like Rico Lewis and James McAtee, suggesting maybe the depth wasn't quite there or didn't step up as needed.
Okay. So the dip sounds like it was pretty widespread then. And that FA Cup final loss, the article seems to use that as a kind of symbol for the whole season's problems.
It absolutely does. Losing to Crystal Palace in the final, described as the latest blow and sort of summing up the season's commitment to underwhelm.
That's a great phrase, commitment to underwhelm. And the winning goal itself, how it happened.
Yeah, it details the Abreki Eze counterattack winner. Classic Palace, really.
You could see it coming, maybe.
Well, that's exactly the source's point. The analysis is sharp here. It says a fine tactician like Pep would have seen that eventuality coming a mile off, but City were powerless to stop it happening. And the conclusion is pretty damning. They got played like a fiddle.
Play like a fiddle. That's a harsh assessment of a tactical situation for a Pep team. So this loss, the whole season really, it feels like it's forcing a look forward, signaling what the source calls a new chapter.
It definitely frames it that way. This new chapter, likely without some big names, maybe De Bruyne, Captain Kyle Walker possibly moving on, perhaps even Gundogan finally.
Right, the older guard.
Exactly, and it points to a clear shift towards recruiting younger blood. Cites that 180-meter winter splurge as evidence that this change is already underway.
And it mentions some specific names, doesn't it? Players who fit that younger profile either arrived or linked.
It does. Omar Marmoush, who came in winter, notes he's helped shape attacking patterns alongside Haaland, and that relationship has bore riper fruit.
Okay.
And Nico Gonzalez, the big January signing from Porto, 50-pounders. The source describes him with some analysis. Dynamic, ball-orientated central midfielder, La Masia graduate, only 23.
So, a specific type.
Very specific. And the article sees him potentially playing instead or even alongside Rodri, which suggests, Pep's ideal midfielder type hasn't eroded entirely despite the issues.
And are there rumors of more midfielders like that coming in?
Well, the source mentions AC Milan's Tijani Reinders is rumored. Similar profile again, suggesting a possible phasing out of Bernardo and Gundogan might be the plan.
Makes sense.
And defensively, the rumored interest in Rayan Aït-Nouri from Wolves, the article reckons that surely spells the end of the Núñez at right-back experiment.
Okay, so maybe that didn't quite work out. So definite types being targeted. But stepping back a bit, the article highlights one really fundamental flaw that this season seemed to expose more than anything else.
Yeah, this is where the analysis really drills down. It identifies the domino effect of Rodri's fall, meaning when he was out injured or suspended. It wasn't just a temporary dip. It revealed, quote, gaping holes in midfield and a fundamental flaw in City's recent process.
A fundamental flaw, and it pins that flaw specifically on recruitment. Is that what the source argues?
That's the opinion presented, yes. The lack of midfield options, able or intelligent enough to play Pep's style. That's called the club's biggest recruitment failure of recent years. Pretty strong stuff.
Wow. Who does it mention didn't fit the bill?
It lists a few. Calvin Phillips, remember him?
Vaguely.
Matheus Nunes, Mateo Kovacic. Even the returning Gundogan, who's 34 now. The source feels they didn't quite fit the brief for that crucial role when Rodri wasn't there.
And there's even a reported quote from Pep about one of them. That sounds telling.
There is. The source quotes Pep apparently saying about Matheus Nunes after one game, I think he's not a player to play in midfield because he's not clever enough.
Not clever enough. Wow. If that's accurate, it really shows the specific kind of, brain he needs in that position.
It absolutely does, that very particular football intelligence. And the stats the article uses really hammer home just how reliant they became on Rodri.
Yeah, tell us about those.
Well, it reminds us the City didn't actually lose a league game until November, which was exactly when Rodri had that significant absence.
Right, I remember that period.
And the implosion that followed, as the article calls it, seemed to take everyone by surprise, uses this great analogy, as if the City hard drive were somehow hacked.
Huh. That's good.
Yeah.
Unmasking secrets.
Yeah. And Pep himself reportedly kept saying, we cannot do it in press conferences then, really highlighting how stuck they were without him.
And the actual statistical dips, they paint a picture too.
Oh, definitely. Failing to score in 6 different league games, that's as many as the previous 2 seasons put together.
That's stark.
Goal-scoring totals way down 72 compared to 96 the season before. Lowest possession average since Pellegrini was manager. And that trademark slick pass and move became glacial. That's how the source puts it.
Glacial, yeah. So the whole system kind of seized up without the main conductor.
That's the analysis, yes. The fundamental parts broke down.
Okay, so beyond that midfield structure issue, the article also talks about a creativity problem, doesn't it? A creative void needing to be filled, especially if De Bruyne leaves.
That's another key area, yeah. Without De Bruyne, who's been the main man for so long, City need a new creator-in-chief. And the article suggests the plan for Foden to just step up into that role now looks far less certain.
So where else could the creativity come from, according to the source? Any other potential sparks?
Well, it mentions Rico O'Reilly emerging and Josko Gvardiol getting forward more, saying they reimagine how City create and sustain threat from wide.
Okay, Gvardiol's runs were noticeable.
Yeah, but the article asks, can that be the only way? It seems to doubt it. It describes signings like Doku and Savinho as just moments players,
Yeah.
talents only ever on show fleetingly.
Right. Flashes, but not consistent week in, week out creativity.
Exactly. Not that sustained influence.
And talking of players maybe not delivering consistently,
Yeah.
the article really zooms in on Jack Grealish, doesn't it? Labels him another problem.
Yeah, it's quite critical here, and it uses evidence to back it up. Reports his incredibly low minutes, just 715 in the league all season.
715. That's nothing, really.
Barely anything. And notes he got more yellow cards, 3, than goal contributions, which was only 2.
Ouch.
And it highlights that his full 90-minute games were mainly against lower league teams, Salford, Leyton Orient, Plymouth, Leicester. The implication being, he wasn't trusted in the bigger matches.
And being benched for the FA Cup final.
Yeah,
That's seen as a big sign.
a very big sign. Benched for a 19-year-old debutante, Claudio Echeverri. The article calls that particularly revealing.
The source's conclusion on Grealish is pretty clear then.
Extremely clear. Based on all that, the opinion offered is blunt. His days are surely numbered.
But there's a twist, isn't there? An irony the article points out about him.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The irony the source sees is that the old Grealish, the vintage Aston Villa brand of uninhibited Grealish.
Yeah, the one they paid 100 meters for.
Exactly. That Grealish had the very blend of intelligence and disruptive creativity that City have so badly missed this season. It's quite something.
Huh. So the player they needed was kind of already there, but not performing that way.
That's the suggestion. And the article also recalls Pep having an explosive rant when asked about dropping Grealish, hinting there's, some tension there.
Right. So, okay, we've got analysis of problems, underperformance, recruitment flaws.
Mm-hmm.
How does Pep Guardiola himself come out of this? What's the impact on his position after a season like that?
Well, this is maybe the most remarkable part. The article notes that few have been protected from the crossfire of this shambolic season. City's first without a major trophy in 8 years.
Except
Pep himself, of course. It observes that rather than the poor results undermining his position, it actually seemed to strengthen it.
strengthened it. How?
Well, it cites him signing a new contract amid the whirlwind of November's collapse that month when they didn't win a single game.
Signing a new deal, then. That's a statement of faith.
A huge one. So his commitment to leading the rebuild, whatever his vision for it is, seems totally secure.
Okay. And what is his stated vision for the summer, according to the quotes in the article? Does he acknowledge the need for change?
He does, but in his own way. The source quotes him from the final day at Fulham. He said, "New faces will come, especially in positions that are a little weaker."
Okay, so acknowledging weaker spots.
But I don't think much. I don't think a lot. He doubled down on that idea I mentioned earlier, saying he'd rather quit than leave players in the freezer. Added, "We have a good squad, they have contracts, they will stay here, and I don't want to have many players."
So back to that core tension again. Acknowledging some weakness, but still strongly preferring a smaller, targeted approach, not a big overhaul.
Exactly. Which brings us right back to the central debate the source sets up. The article frames this whole summer as the next installment of the saga, calling it more intriguing still, precisely because of this conflict. The scale of the identified problems versus the manager's stated preference for fixing them.
Right. And it leaves us with a big question for the forecast, doesn't it?
It does. The article poses it directly, quoting the source. Will Pep get his wish of a small refresh? Or are we about to see a truly transformative summer in pursuit of remedial glory?
Remedial glory. Love that.
Yeah, and it reminds us this drama will unfold during the transfer window. It gives the dates, June 1st to 10th, then June 16th to September 1st. That's the time frame to watch.
So you could really see how digging into this source reveals, well, a really complex picture. It's not just City had a bad year. It's this fascinating debate about how you manage a squad, especially after huge success.
Yeah, the impact of key players like Rodri, the recruitment strategy maybe having some flaws exposed, and then the manager's whole philosophy clashing, potentially, with the scale of the issues.
We've looked at the reasons the source gives for that dip, put some key players under the microscope based on the article's view, and highlighted those contrasting ideas presented about how to fix things. Reporting on the analysis, the opinions, the debate in the source. And it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? When a team that's been so dominant hits a wall, what's the right way back? Is it the subtle tweaks, trusting the leader's long-term vision?
Or does fixing fundamental problems sometimes demand bigger, bolder changes, even if the person in charge might prefer not to make them? It's a classic leadership dilemma, really. It goes way beyond just football.
It absolutely does. A really great source to unpack.
Definitely. So thanks for sharing this one with us. Hopefully this deep dive helps you, the listener, see those key insights and the really big questions hanging over Man City as this crucial summer transfer window gets going.